Hey guys, welcome back to another Space Ape Varsity Masterclass. We're here at University of Greenwich today. Say hi, everybody. And hi, everybody, as well, to all of you guys watching at home. So today is our third masterclass, and the idea of masterclasses basically came from a project called Space Ape Varsity, which means that we're going to try to do more in the collegiate space. And masterclasses are the first of these initiatives that we are kicking off. So far, you've heard from Andrew Munden, who was talking about designing for competition. That was last week. And you also heard from Tom Mejias, who talked about Creative Engineering 101. And if you guys missed any of those classes, you can check them out on our Twitch channel, watch them to your heart's content. And we will also be re-airing those classes at a later time. And we'll have those guys sit in the chat so that way if you guys have questions, you can still ask those questions later on. Today, though, you're going to hear from Adam, and he's going to talk to you about game design for modern times. And after his lecture, we're also going to have a Q&A with all of you guys in the audience and as well with everybody watching on Twitch. So some of our mods are in the chat right now, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in there, and then we will get to those after the presentation. But first off, I'd like to invite Adam up, and he's going to talk to you about game design for modern times. See you guys.
Thanks, Zeb. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Kramarzewski, and I'm a game designer at Space Ape Games. I've been doing game design for 11 years now, started in 2007, right after high school, actually. And I worked for 4 companies, Game Lion in Poland, Gameloft in Madrid, Spain, as well as Square Enix London and Space Ape Games. And over the years, I had a chance of working on over 30 game projects and released 17 of them. And I wrote a single book, which is coming out next month, called Practical Game Design. A little about Space Ape Games. We're a London-based mobile game studio. We founded in 2012. We have over 100 people. We have 4 live games right now: Samurai Siege, Rival Kingdoms, Transformers, Air Force, and Fastlane. But right now we're focused on development. We have over 70% of our resources dedicated to making new games in new genres. And majority of the stake in the company is held by Supercell, the makers of Clash of Clans. And our goal as a company is to create the highest quality, most successful mobile games in the world. And we think we can do it by innovating and iterating and trying to create a genre-defining hit. So find a place that we can own. And today, we'll start by taking a quick reality check, looking at the industry where it is right now. We will then talk about approaching game design from 3 perspectives. We'll talk about who game designers are, what the game designs you're going to work on are going to be like, how to develop an idea, and how to approach working in a team. We'll then have some tips for your future, and we will have time for questions. So starting with the reality check. So right now, the games industry is a very, very fierce and competitive place. It's also quite unpredictable because of how much innovation is going on. And discovery and retention are some of the biggest issues we face as developers. We are all fighting for attention spans, which are really, really limited. And there's thousands and thousands of games and developers trying to all grasp it. And crowdfunding as a platform was seen as a threat to publishing space, but now it has peaked, and unless you have a very established name, you are unlikely to get funding and get much traction on the platform. Publishers are still alive and well. Making games is very risky, it takes a lot of money, and if you're not holding good licenses and good stashes of money to fund the development, you might be in trouble. So publishers are still alive and doing well. The golden age of indie development, the one we saw in the early 2010s, is largely over. There are still miracles that can happen. PUBG moved 30 million copies in 1 year. It's a phenomenon, but it's not something you should count on if you're developing a game in an indie space. It's difficult. Barriers to entry are very low. Everyone can get a laptop and get a free engine like Unity on Unreal and make a game. But marketing that game and sustaining it is the difficult part now. And game design as a role is an established one right now, but it is quite hard to get into. And it was hard, and it's still hard today. But if you have the passion to get into game development, and if you have the drive, and if you put your time into it, then this job and this industry can be a very, very rewarding one. So with that done, we'll focus on the 3 big parts of the talk today, beginning with the people, that is the game designers. And game design roles we can be roughly broken down into these categories. We have generalists, so various juniors and senior and lead designers, as well as creative directors and creative leads. But generalists are people who take care of every single part of game design, so they can dabble into economy and then jump into balancing and then do some implementation. They take care of everything in general. Then we also have more specialized roles, like economy designers, monetization specialists, people who are really, really looked after right now, looked for because of the pronounced effect of free-to-play gaming on the market. We also have level designers who are kind of a mix between a 3D artist often and a game designer. We have content and mission designers. If you have 30,000 quests in World of Warcraft, someone has to make them. We also have narrative designers, so great storytellers. Systems designers, people who design particular systems, very often found in AAA industries. So you could be a designer who just takes care of multiplayer combat mechanics in Uncharted, or just takes care of one particular system somewhere else. And we have technical designers, so people who are cross between programmers and game designers, so that not only they think of a system, but they also try and implement it and make it work. Now, when it comes to game design as a kind of branch of development, everyone on the team can be involved in game design, but the designers are the ones who are responsible for it. And that's the key aspect, is the responsibility, not who does it, but who is responsible for it. So, moving on, every position that you take or you find can be different. Some of them are really, really paper-based, where a designer just writes the document, sends it off, and never sees it even made. Some are very political, where you have to, fight for influence with various levels of management. And some positions are really hands-on, very simple, just get down and dirty in the editor, moving things around, putting balancing numbers, and seeing things work. But mostly, it's going to be a cross of some of these realities. And a lot of you is going to ask yourself, well, should I specialize because I really am interested in level design or content design, or should I T-shape? And T-shaping is what we call when you go kind of deep on game design in general, but then you branch out and you start looking at things like learning how to do audio design, or maybe special effects, or other things, or maybe basic scripting. And basically, that's the letter T, right? That's the T in the T-shape. And I think the answer to that question depends where you expect to land, and the scope of a project will influence your career and where you start your career. So if you're working on a large team, like a AAA console or PC industry, that usually has more hierarchy, and it also has more specialization. There is space for one person to just take care of just multiplayer game design. If you're, however, working on a small or mid-sized team, and I would say that's right now the vast majority of the teams we encounter, especially in mobile and indie development, you will need to have a very comprehensive set of skills, because there's only one person, could be one or two designers on the team, so it's best if you can cover as large an area as you can. So yeah, I would say you have to go where you think you'll learn the most, but unless you have unless you're really good at one particular branch, I would advise you to try and T-shape and try and get an understanding of various areas that the game design can envelop, so that you can fit into various development realities. And speaking of development realities, these are my tasks as a game designer on one of the projects I worked on, Transformers Air Force. And I'm a generalist, so you start with some simple stuff. You do design documentation, you communicate the design, you create and implement stuff. I don't do art, but I do implement it, do put it in the game, make sure it works, make sure it's balanced. And then you do the level design, you write some dialogue, and you integrate the story. And then you do more. You do stuff like playtesting, you manage external resources, so you're getting people, audio outsources to do the audio that you need for the game. You also implement some visual effects. So I did some of the particle effects and explosions, stuff like that, because we have a very limited amount of people who do that in the office. So if it's just one simple addition, I'd rather do it myself than to bother them. Also, some of the user interface and user experience design. We do have experienced and great people on the team doing that. But if you're working on something new, you might want to communicate your idea. So you might need to know how to do it and how to design a user interface. And then there's also community outreach. Me and Deborah did streams every week on Transformers, and you have to make yourself available to the player base. You need to make sure to listen to them, do Q&As and videos, and reach out and give back as well to the community. Now, these are the tasks I took, but there's also these two giant tasks like economy design and live operations, which is like setting up special events and sales and making sure the games are running and are profitable and well supported. Fortunately, I didn't have to do those two things on Transformers, but I did on previous companies, and if you do take care of that as well, that's going to take a large amount of your time. So there's going to be less and less space for for thinking and experimenting if you try to do so much in one position. So I would say, yeah, try and T-shape if you can, because it will pay off in the long term. Now let's talk a bit about the product or the games, starting with the vision. And how we have to approach working with a vision. So the first and foremost, the origins of a game idea or the vision do not matter. This could be a publisher coming in with an idea, they have an IP and money, and they want to make a game with Batman. Or it could be your managers telling you to do a particular game, or it could be some kind of student project when everyone's kind of chipping in, or there's one person with a vision. It doesn't matter where it comes from, it matters what you do with it. And what you have to do is you have to start by refining and questioning the vision. So why is this particular vision exciting? And if it doesn't excite you, why does it excite other people? Because some people like Justin Bieber, others like death metal. These are both valid points of interest, and you need to make sure that you can put yourself in the shoes of people that might be excited about this particular game. And if you cannot get excited, if you can't get excited about a vision that isn't yours, but you're in a commercial situation where you're working in a studio and someone says, make a pony game. But you're like, I hate pony games, I hate ponies. I don't want to make a pony game. Well, why don't you find a different job? Because in the reality of things, it's very, very unlikely you will work on a game of your dreams, on the game you particularly want to make in the very first several years, if ever. So you need to learn to embrace other people's visions and learn how to take them as your own, find things that are exciting about them, and work them into a game that you think is the best game possible. So you have a limited amount of resources and you want to make the best with them. So next step is, can you imagine a finished product? Can you imagine playing that game that doesn't even exist yet? That's, for some people it's easy. For others, it's a really huge step, trying to picture a system that doesn't exist and all the outcomes of it. Who will want to play this game and who will not want to play this game? These are also very important questions, because that defines who you're going to make this game for, which means there are certain trade-offs that you have to make sure that this game appeals to that part of the audience. And also, if you're taking care of, if you're thinking like a business person, if you're involved in these things, you have to ask yourself, is this a game an opportunity, and why is it an opportunity? There's 10,000 games coming out of Steam every couple of days. How is this going to be different? How is this going to stand out? Why should we even spend time doing it? And then try to see if you can convince people that it's a good idea. So you might have to work with someone else's vision that you initially didn't believe in, and try to make sure that it works, and try to make the project go on, and try to make artists excited about making ponies. Maybe they weren't excited about making ponies again, but there's something you can do about it. And also ask yourself, again, if that's your reality, if you're in the development, if you have any say in this, do you have the team? Do you have the tools and the resources to do the game? Because if you have a great idea for the best MMO ever, but it requires 300 people to pull off, and you have 5, just move on to a different idea. All right, and yeah, remember, game ideas on their own are worthless. A lot of people think game designers are the idea people. We are not really idea people, we're the idea curators. We try to make sure that the best ideas get into the game and they are realized to the best possible reality. So, moving on, one of the first things you'll be doing when working with a game is to creating a game concept document. And one of the common mistakes when doing it is trying to jump straight into the 100 pages of design Bible, and I'm going to write everything I can imagine about this game. I'm going to define everything. Take it easy. Do your research first. Look at the other things in the market, because there are certain ideas, certain problems that you anticipate that might have already been answered or explored. And then expand it into a concept slowly. And that concept will usually start with things like the elevator pitch, where you have 1 or 2 sentences that should excite someone. If you're just traveling in the elevator, one sentence should be enough to capture their attention. Then you have things like the game overview, the target platform and audience. And then you focus on things like the key features or game pillars, things without which the game wouldn't be the game. So the game pillars of Uncharted, for example, would be action, shooting. It would be the traversal, climbing, and it would also be puzzle solving. And without one of these 3 elements, the game wouldn't be the game as we know it. And further, on that point, you have to find your USPs, your unique selling points. So try to find things that make this game stand out and focus on them. So for Titanfall, we have the Titans and the parkour elements, and all the marketing was also focused on that because it's a differentiator. And in Battlefield, you have things like the destructible environments, you have vehicles, you have the scale, which is why Battlefield is all about the epicness of the warfare and the conflict there. After that, you have to define your next steps. So are you going to prototype something? Are you going to expand your document further? Are you going to make a short video that will show how the game is played? Even if you cannot prototype the game, you can maybe make a video. Or maybe you can do a collage or a slideshow, I don't know. But what I do know is that a single slide should be enough to intrigue or sell the idea. That would be your elevator pitch. 20 slides should be enough to explain the game to a fellow game developer. And if you need more than 1 hour to explain the entire game to someone, then that means your game is either too big, or you're not succinct enough, or you have just too much stuff in there. So try to cut back and focus on what's important, what makes this game, and not just any game. Following that, we often dive into things called GDDs, game design document. And there is no template, unfortunately. A lot of people, especially junior designers, they ask for a template. Can I just get any template from a previous company? There rarely is any template that will work. But what it will work is taking it easy, because it's quite daunting, because JDDs can get to 100 pages or more. Start by outlining the entire document, every single section that you can think of, then do the bullet points inside it, and then fill the content. It's a bit like writing a book, so you should approach it like writing a book. And the best way to do it is outline, bullet points, content. Make sure to use cloud-based collaborative tools like Google Docs, Slides, or anything that's cloud-based, so that people can share the document and edit it easily and work on it together. And remember, you're writing for your team or you're writing for a publisher sometimes. You're not writing for yourself. So ask your team how they want the content in the document to be presented. If your programmer loves just having bullet points, 5 bullet points, then that's fine. Like, do it as they like it. And do not do it the way you think it should be or the way you believe game design should be written. And make sure to prioritize the information. So start by every single point of the document. It's at risk of going really, really deep into detail that it doesn't really concern anyone. So start by going very broad, an overview of a subject, and then go into detail that most publishers might even skip reading because they're not interested in how exactly the agro-mechanics work for this particular creature. And also avoid putting any balancing values or any numbers, if you can, in your documentation, because the moment you release your GDD out, that's the moment this is going to be updated. Basically, the numbers are going to change so often and so quickly that you will never keep up with it. And it's fine. You don't have to try and keep up with it. Just remove it from the document, put it in a spreadsheet, put it somewhere where it should be, not in a written piece of information. And also expand your vocabulary. So use drawings, sketches, reference screenshots, videos, anything you can, because games are an interactive medium, and we try to put them in the confines of a paper document. It doesn't really fit very well, so try to expand your vocabulary. And review your stuff early and often. So don't wait until your document is done, because if it's not done, I'm not proud of it, I'm not going to show it to anyone. Show it, review it. Did you write one section about the game mechanics? Show it to the programmer, show it to the artist, see if they understand it, see what questions arise, and then you can elaborate and you can make it better. So when you're actually done, you know where you're standing. Right, next step with any game project is actually to define the scope and structure, and that happens relatively early on, probably between the concept and the GDD. And one of the things you have to be really, really careful with is the so-called feature creep, where you try to put everything, kitchen sink and all, into your game in hopes of just making the best game. The best game should have the most things. Not necessarily, just has to have a good combination of things well executed. So one of the ways you can control your scope is to ask yourself, is the game content-driven or systems-driven? So a game that's content-driven is like Sudoku. It's a puzzle, you solve a puzzle, and then you kind of need a new puzzle because I've already done this one, so it has really very little replay value. A systems-driven game, like chess, for example, has a limited amount of rules, limited amount of pieces, but nearly unlimited amount of scenarios that can play out. It has a very wide possibility space because a single chessboard can have millions of outcomes and billions of outcomes, depending on how you move things around. So depending on what your team is capable of or what kind of team you're working with, you will want to go into one way or another. So if I had, for example, 7 artists who want to work with me, and they're all great 3D artists and 2D artists and character artists, but I have really no programmers, or I have very limited programming skills. Maybe I want to make a story-driven game, a narrative game that's very content-driven, where I will write the story and they'll make the characters and animate them, and we'll create the new Walking Dead, but the one that Telltale Games does. They're really good with narrative games. Perhaps that's what we should do as well. Or if we have a lot of programmers but very little art and very little support in this of this type, perhaps we want to make a systems-driven game where we'll make a lot of systems and simulations, and we need maybe no art, like Dwarf Fortress has no art, but has incredible simulations. It's done by 2 programmers, if I'm correct. And it has just infinite amount of possibilities coming out of these very refined systems. Moving on, try to establish your critical vector of progression. So this kind of term is dedicated to this path of your game. Could be like a player level, it could be a story progression. This path that defines how people progress and how people travel on the path. And you know that if your game is all about traveling between this point in the story to that point in the story, then anything that doesn't support that path can be cut and removed. Don't focus on that. Focus on what makes the critical vector of progression work. And you can then, once it's defined, once you know what to focus on, you can create a content lifespan document, which is basically a table organized by your critical vector of progression. So I could see, for example, if it's a linear action-adventure game, I have all the levels, and I see all the pieces that come in at different times and different places. And I see, okay, there's a new creature in level 3, and there's a new game mechanic, this new gadget that unlocks at level 4. And I know which parts I need to do when, and I can easily plan development, and I can easily see which things I should focus on first, and which things I can leave for later, which things I could potentially cut if they're not needed. And then try to prototype and innovate and the most innovative or the most risky ideas. So your scope will have massive question marks around things that you don't know if they work or not. We'll speak about prototyping in a moment. And then, of course, you have to reassess your scope regularly. So as you prototype, as you develop, as you try to make a character that will, or try to make a mission, or try to script an enemy or a boss encounter, that will affect your planning, that will affect your scope, and you'll find out things that are working, things that are easy to do, things that are harder to do, and based on that, you can kind of change your game to make sure that it's a game that you can deliver. Speaking of prototyping, I'll go really, really quickly on this one. The most important thing is to decide on a really good objective, what you're going to focus on, and make sure to not prototype things that are already answered by a different game or by a different team or by a different situation. So you want to prototype things that are worthy prototyping, things that are innovative, things that are risky. So for example, if I was making new Call of Duty and I added jetpack mechanics, I would be prototyping the jetpack. I wouldn't be prototyping a new enemy with a shield or something. It doesn't matter. I wouldn't be prototyping a new gun. I want to prototype the jetpack because that's the risky one. And also, if you're going for a real-time based game that requires very visceral reactions and very real-time systems, like a shooter, for example, you probably want to go digital. But if you're going for a turn-based game or a game that can be abstracted into kind of slower paced, then like XCOM, for example, then you can very well deliver an XCOM game like in paper, so without any need for code. And yeah, after the prototype has done its job, be sure that you can discard it and move on. Don't feel like the time you spent on prototype needs to be pushed into the actual game. It doesn't. It's there to help answer a question. Once it answers the question, you move on. And a lot more tips about prototyping can be found in the previous talk from last week by Tom Mejias, Creative Engineering. You can find it on Twitch TV and rewatch it again if you like to learn more. Now, let's focus on how, which is working a team as a game designer. Now, some of the teams operate in a kind of dictatorship way, where let's abstract the game as a horse. You're gonna end up with a very, very sad and lonely horse, like Bojack. You could have a lot of control. You're a creative director, or you might be. It doesn't even have to be a very hierarchical top-down team. It could be just one, it could be a college team, but there's one person who just thinks, I'm a game designer, it's everything the way I see it, the way I say it. That kind of person will have all the control, but they'll have very little creativity because they're just thinking with themselves. And the morale on the team is going to suffer because no one else will feel like they have the power to influence the product. You also have a committee. A committee creates a horse like this. It's interesting, but it's not really good as a horse. You have all the creativity in the world because everyone's just brainstorming and throwing wild ideas, but you have very little control of what actually goes into the game and whether the things that go into the game are things that make sense in the context of what the game is trying to be. A good design is elegant design, is a design that's focused. And you also have zero responsibility because nobody, if something doesn't work, they'll be like, ooh, it's not my fault. I just threw the ideas around. And very little responsibility is actually taken when everyone's part of the design process and nobody owns it. So what you want to do is you want to get a horse like that, which is better than a horse because it has wings. And the way you can get it is first through communication. So design basically is communicating things that work or someone else's ideas or someone else's solutions or your solutions, doesn't matter. You communicate things to make sure that they get implemented if you're not doing them yourself. And your team is everything because if the programmers don't want to work for you, if an artist doesn't want to listen to you, then you might as well find a different team or find a different job. You need to open up the creativity to make sure that the morale stays up. So you're not an idea person again, you are an idea curator. So make sure that you can delegate certain things. And as long as there's clear vision ownership throughout the team, this will work fine. So for example, let's say we have a 3D artist, he's doing characters, he's great at characters, and he knows exactly how to do character customization in your game. Let them in charge of the character customization screen and everything else in it, and make sure that they know that this is their area. And you can then easily delegate that knowing that they will take responsibility for it. So if something doesn't work, they'll make the decisions that are required to make this thing work. So you don't have to design the whole game. You need to make sure that every area of the game has a clear owner. And remember, users and product first. There's no space for pride. There's no space for ego. There's only space for what makes your players happy and what makes the game work. And you have to embrace changes. And there's going to be a lot of changes. Products will be delayed, canceled. Deals will fall through the roof, and sometimes you will have things that you feel of as your baby, as part of you, things that are full of ideas that you thought up in the shower, like, this is the best thing ever, and the next day, it's dead. And you'll need to be able to move on from that and get excited about something else. So sometimes, it's important to care, but it's also important to know when to let go. And also when to not let go. So there are things that make your games work. So if someone's trying to change a thing that is fundamental to what the game is, if I was making Portal and someone's like, I like the whole thing about the abandoned research lab, but I'm not really sold on the portals. I'm like, no, portals stay. That's what the game is about. Make sure to pick the battles if you need to. Most of the time, it's not worth it, but sometimes it is. And let's talk about feedback a little. And that's one of the very, very important things when working as a game designer, how to give and receive feedback. And again, people like different things for different reasons. Acknowledging why really will help you. And that will help you to understand who the feedback is coming from. Is it a potential player? Is it expert in the field? If I'm making a Candy Crush, if I'm making a casual puzzle game, I don't care what a Call of Duty 360 no scope guy is saying. I care about what my mom will say because she might be the player. Again, good feedback is not positive feedback. So you want to find out what's wrong with the game. You don't want yes men around you. You don't want everyone saying, yeah, it's amazing, it's great. And then you release it and everyone's like, pfft. Yeah, like free 5-star reviews. But there's free reviews and people quit after 10 minutes. So there's something, you don't want just that. And again, it's not about you. Or them, the people who give you feedback. It's about the game. So we don't care whether there's personal drama involved or anything personal stakes. It's only about finding out what's wrong with the game, how we can improve the game. There's nothing personal in the feedback. And why someone is saying something is more important than what they're saying. So if someone tells me, oh, increase the damage of this boss guy by 10, then that doesn't mean increase the damage of the boss guy by 10. It means maybe this guy is not effective enough. Okay, how? Is he not pulling his special attacks? Is he not keeping aggro? Is your weapon too strong? What are the reasons that make the player say increase the damage by 10? Because there might be different solutions than the one that someone is suggesting. Next up, playtesting, which is kind of how we get feedback a lot of the times. So it's important to get people to play your game as often and as soon as possible. And this could be your friends or colleagues. It could be strangers if you can find them. Maybe in the university you have plenty of people that you might not know, and you might get 10 minutes of the time to play your game. Try and distance yourself from the product, because if someone has a personal stake between you and them, then it's quite hard to give unbiased opinion. So if you can even pretend it's your friend's game, not mine, but I'm just getting feedback for him. And also, throughout the test, try to ask your testers to think aloud. Make them vocalize their thoughts. Instruct them to do so at the beginning so you don't interrupt them later. But you want them to tell you, like, I'm clicking here because I think I can upgrade my character. And you're like, OK. You're testing the game, not the player. So you have to be reassuring. All of the times, the game is going to be bad. It's going to be not ready for the player. That's fine. Just make sure that that the person who's playing the game doesn't feel like they're failing, doesn't feel like they suck, because all of them will then close off and they will not speak and they will not help you make the game better. So try to observe. Don't explain. Don't sell the game. You don't want to have one more download. Doesn't matter. Just watch. And it will hurt you a lot to see people fail, and they will fail miserably, and your game is going to be failed because the game is failing, not them. If that hurts you, you're doing it right. Try to keep the test on the track. There's no point in having someone be stuck on a single screen for 30 minutes. Just respect their time. And make sure to answer any of the questions that they ask at the end of the test, not throughout it. You don't want to teach them how to play the game by answering their questions. You want to answer the questions later if they're curious. And focus again on the origin of the questions and suggestions, not exactly what they are. And ask the players at the end of the test to explain the game to you. So ask them, what does this thing do? What are these tools for? Or how do I use the pickaxe? You will then see whether the mental model that they're building is the mental model you expect them to be. Because sometimes people will be able to play your game and they'll be successful, and then you realize they didn't get the game at all. And you put a challenge on top of what you thought they already know, and boom, it breaks. Track the feedback. So if you can, record the sessions, get some kind of basic profile. What's the age, what's the gender, what's the favorite games of the person that is playing your game. All right, we're blazing through this. Tips for your future. So first of all, try and take shortcuts. There's many shortcuts to take, starting with things like the Unity Asset Store and the Unreal Marketplace. There's free sound effects to have. There's royalty-free music. You can get 400 assets for £9. And I'm pretty sure you can deduct that later. Or maybe if you have a student license, maybe you don't even have to pay it. Maybe you can get free asset packs for your student projects. In a situation like that, maybe I don't have a 3D artist. I can get 400 assets for £9. That's a deal. There's many shortcuts to take. You don't have to try and fill every single position. I pulled motion capture animations to my game for like £30, and I no longer need to ask my animator to do it for me. And if you can't program, that's fine. There's no worries. I can't program. I can understand how to program. I can do visual programming, but I cannot do actual scripting. It's OK. There's tools like GameMaker, Construct, Stencil, and many more that use completely visual, non-threatening approach to programming. And you can make a game like Hotline Miami, which sold millions of copies. So there's no shame in using these tools. You can also use plugins like Playmaker, which make things a bit more visual and a bit more easy to understand. And it helps a lot to understand how programmers think. And you can learn that by either deconstructing sample projects or trying to build something simple by yourself. And there's tons of free videos and tutorials. So all you need to do is put a little of your time every week, every day, maybe half an hour a day, and you will learn how to do these things in no time. And when it comes to what and how to learn, I'll start by saying that theory is good, practice is even better, but ultimately you need both to make the best decisions and the best work you can for your games. Start by designing working game systems. It doesn't have to be anything high-end. You can just use paper and dice, and you can make a card game, you can make a board game. Build something that works and learn from the failures when it doesn't work. Try to mod games or use map editors, or you could use Super Mario level maker to make levels and then record them. That's essentially teaching you how to do level design. You can use Little Big Planets to make whole game modes. There's plenty of tools nowadays that you can use without any programming expertise to build up your game design portfolio. And self-study. What you do, 5 to 9 or whatever the schedule is not enough. So if you want to really strive and get somewhere, you need to make sure to read by yourself, to find the books that intrigue you. There's YouTube videos, podcasts, there's plenty of material out there that will educate you, some of it for free. And try to go beyond games. So if you go into popular science, psychology, physics, cinematography, all of these areas of interest will make you a more creative and more open-minded person, therefore a better game designer. And spend some time with the software. That goes without saying. If you don't know what a VLOOKUP formula is, you're going to have a really hard time doing an economy document. So try and educate yourself on the basics of like Office package and Unity, Unreal. Know how to use these things, even if you don't know how to make full games in them. And there's other things like art packages like Photoshop. You can get a student license or a free trial. Free software like Audacity to learn how to edit sound and even cut sound effects into your own game. You might get access to free sound banks, and then you'll be able to cut things together and combine sounds together to have something that works for your game. Now, if you would like to get a job in the games industry, you need to know that jumping into industry takes a lot of time, effort, and passion. So you start by building your portfolio. Try and connect as well. So don't just sit in your own bedroom or do it, but as long as you connect with other developers through forums. You can go to game jams. You can go to BAFTA Gurus initiatives. Programs are available in London. Be ready to accept suboptimal jobs and move countries. If, for example, the ideal position that you need, a junior design position, is opening up and it's in Barcelona or Berlin, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to wait until there's something in London because I live in London. Well, it's a global industry. You need to be able to move and grasp any opportunity you have, especially early on. Once you have several years of experience, you'll be able to pick and choose. You'll have 1, 2, 3 job offers a week. But until then, you'll have to sometimes bite the bullet and just go with something that is available right now. And ultimately, degree is very helpful, but it's all about skills, experience, and attitude. So you want someone who is curious, you want someone who's passionate, but also humble, and someone who's ready to learn from their mistakes and keep pushing forward even when things are not going out their way. That's it from me. Further reading, I've got a book coming out next month. It is over 400 pages of practical stuff that's, things that are working in the industry right now, not things that were working 15 years ago. And you can use these codes to get a 50% off the ebook or 15% off the print. It's coming out next month. I will now take questions.
Cool. Shall we give Adam a nice round of applause? So if you guys in the audience have questions, I'll come around to you. So just stick your hand up, and there we go. And you guys on Twitch as well, if you have questions, just pop them into chat now. We'll get to them.
Hi, I'm studying computing over here in my second year, and I was thinking of going towards UX in game design. You were talking earlier about being able to let go of your baby from a daily basis, which I personally find it very hard, and I was going to ask you, how do you cope with that kind of changes?
Yeah, for me it was important to internalize that this is part of the industry and part of the job. And it's the same, if you think about how many drafts of screenplays, how many drafts or of various like movies and stuff like that have to be thrown away to make something that's brilliant, you have to accept it as part of the process. So part of the creative process is doing things that I think are great, but maybe for some whatever random reason can't be made. But what you can do is you can then take all the learnings you had from that project and apply them elsewhere. So every time I write a game design document, every time I do a menu flow, every time I design a screen or implement something, I gain experience. And that experience is not only building my portfolio, it's also building my confidence. And the next time I'm doing something is the 10th time I'm doing it, even though I only released maybe one game, but I have experience working on 10 projects. And that's the only way to do it. And accept it as a part of the challenge. And once you know that it's part of the day-to-day life, you will then be hopefully a bit more ready to accept it. And you know, ultimately, I've seen people who are not ready for it. I worked with a designer who, at one point, just got up and left because the amount of changes that were streaming up from the HQ in the top was just so astounding. He couldn't take it. But yeah, it's part of the job being able to take it, and you can train by just letting go.
All right, we've got another question from Darren here.
So with game design documents, one thing which I think kind of kills a project is where it's Word document. It's obvious it's a Word document, it's just text. And personally I prefer a good balance of having diagrams and visuals and sketches. Would you say there's any kind of balance in that, or what works best for you guys? Is it kind of seeing kind of features bunched together with, or would it be kind of more of a kind of linear document?
Yeah, so when it comes, right now in Space Ape Games, we produce games in a quite different manner, where it's a bit more organic and a bit more iterative. But last design document I made for Transformers Air Force, there was a publisher involved, so I had to create a document that they would be able to sign off. And that was a large document, but full of diagrams, full of text. What I found was is best is to do something that your programming team is comfortable with. So for example, if someone knows exactly how to design a good camera for the game, then maybe all you need to do, because they work with cameras, all you need to do maybe is just to say it's a top-down camera like here, and you give a screenshot. And they'll be able to work it out. Just list a couple options that you need to be able to have with the camera. So I would say start high level and then ask where the detail has to be filled in, because throughout the development itself, you'll have to create individual feature spec documents. So for example, we'll do a game design document in January, and we're working on the game. And in September, we're doing the social features. And by then, the GDD is completely out of date, but that's fine. And what we do is I'm going to create a new short document about this particular social feature we're going to implement in this next development milestone. So you would basically, a GDD is going to be either living, breathing, or it's going to be shelved, and then you move towards more individual pieces that build the puzzle rather than just having a huge, enormous document. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, actually, just one follow-up. What would you say is the best format? Is it a Word doc? Would it be PowerPoint and slides? Would it be a wiki? What do you find most comfortable?
Oh, just for the benefit of Twitch, who can't hear you.
So the question was, what's the best format? Would it be a wiki or a document or a slideshow? I would say it depends whether you have to sell the idea or not. So if you have to sell the idea to the publisher, you might want to try to create a slideshow that is quite clean and succinct, and it's quite accessible to the upper management. If you don't have that problem, then you might go for wiki if people on the team are experienced working with them. But one thing I found with the wikis is that very often you just get lost in the web. It's like trying to find, okay, you read about this and you read about that, and it's all kind of connected, but it's all spread in various places. Well, and what many people find most accessible is a document that they can read and sign off. So they can like, okay, after lunch I'm going to read the GDD, and he spends 2 hours reading the GDD, but then he's done, and it's fine because he starts at page 1 and page 100, and that's very hard to do with wikis. So I didn't do many wikis, and when I did work with wikis from other designers, it was a little cumbersome. So I would say a Google Docs document is probably a bit more accessible. And then what you do is, if something doesn't fit into it, like a big menu flow or like a economy spreadsheet, you put it in a separate document, you link to it from the GDD. So you have one place where you know how to find things about the game design, and then various links to different documents that are detailing any particular area.
Cool. There's a question from Gats Custom, which you sort of went over already, but they're asking, without having any background in game development, how would you get your foot in the door? Is it possible even without a degree, they're asking?
Yes, I think it is possible. As long as you have a portfolio of any sort, that is you being able to express that you can work on a game, make a game. I spoke about using modding games or making your own projects. Even if you're not a programmer or an artist, you can do these things. So now there's really very little excuse for game designers, for aspiring game designers, to say, I can't work on a game because I don't have 3 people. If you can't convince 3 people to work on your game, first of all, that's a problem, number one. And secondly, if you don't want to convince 3 people to work on your game, then you can still use these tools and shortcuts to make a game. And make sure to do something that's, keep your ambitions low at the beginning. Just make something that works, and that will be, have one good idea in there, and that should be enough to kind of convey that you can think about game design as a process. And yeah, you can educate, you can self-educate yourself, and then take it from there. You could enter as a QA. This is something that was a big opportunity. Like this was like a known way to be a game designer back in the day, several years ago. Like get into QA, and then when people trust you with working on games and you understand how games work and development works a bit better, you can move to a design position. Right now, apparently, from what I hear, it's quite difficult, and it's better to seek a junior position somewhere.
There's a question from Yatorino, and they're asking, so the student game designer will not be responsible for doing his stuff, such as level designs and such. So the artists and programmers need to cover up the designer's job. But we are very occupied with our responsibilities, so most designer stuffs are neglected. Any suggestions?
Neglected in a way that people will not spend time working on their features, or?
Let me say it again.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's a long question. So he or she says they're in the middle of the production phase of a game development process. Unfortunately for my class, there's only one active game designer that switches in between 2 teams of students while acting as the game designer lecturer's assistant. So they're trying to juggle a lot of different responsibilities. And are there any suggestions if some things are getting neglected?
Yes. So if things are getting neglected, then identify the areas that they are and divide them amongst the team. So you do not want to create a committee and like, okay, so he's not giving us enough time, so let's all design the game. Sure, but make sure that every person is responsible for a particular area, document what you're doing and why, and then make sure to communicate these things to the designer once they're involved. So you don't need a full-time designer on the team as long as people have clear design responsibilities within the team. And for anyone who's there, like programmers and artists, it's always good to understand how to make better games by dabbling a bit more into what makes games fun and what makes them work. So that's what I would say. Delegate.
The Frog Gamer is asking, what are the best types of projects a programmer can show in an interview if he has no previous work experience?
Oh, wow. I think the best answer to that question would be probably from Tom Mejia's last week, Creative Engineering 101. I think he had a very similar question. So I'll attempt to remember what he said. He mentioned, I think, something about trying to reproduce a single mechanic and how it works. So you could try, for example, to create something simple. You could create a portal, for example, from Portal. Again, that might not be simple enough. Or you could try dabbling in fluid physics. So try to work with a single mechanic and put it to life. You don't need a full game. You don't need a full game design. You need to be able to demonstrate a clever solution to a programming challenge.
And Chan Gucci is asking, a lot of similar questions like this, people trying to get into the industry. And he says, I'm an experienced project manager, but never worked in the gaming area. Do I have a chance to get involved without previous experience? So a lot of people coming in fresh.
It's hard to say. I don't know what kind of opportunities are there for assistant producers or associate producers, because you probably would have to level a little down before you can level up. People will not entrust you with hundreds of thousands worth of development budget if you do not have experience delivering games, because delivering games is much more difficult on average than delivering, let's say, enterprise apps. Because an enterprise app, it has a design, it has a user flow, has an experience. You just deliver it, you write it, you make sure it works, make sure you can't hack it, and it's done. With a game, you do the same things, then you realize it's not fun, and you have to do it again and again and again and again, and you go over budget in 5 days' time. So yeah, it's probably going to be hard to go directly into games production unless you start at a junior level.
Lola Co's asking, I'm finding trouble getting into QA, even though it is entry. I don't have a degree, but I have a portfolio showing off some work on mods. What else am I missing? Would taking on some agile management course help me out?
It would, yeah, probably would help you out. Most game teams work in using agile methodologies. Having any kind of certificate to help you with that would be of great assistance. You could also try and get into as many kind of testing situations as you can. So there's close to alpha tests and stuff like that. That will help you on top of doing stuff like modding. So I would try and build your credibility, build your understanding of the games industry and project management, and that will hopefully help you secure the QA job.
Any more questions from the audience? I'll come around. Otherwise, Kuliga is asking, how does one get involved in the game development community? Are there any places where they can meet other developers, etc.?
Absolutely. I think Reddit has numerous subreddits dedicated to development. Could be mobile, could be indie, could be AAA. You could get involved in Reddit. You can also, while you're exploring things like Gamma Sutra, there's lots of people who write articles there, some really, really great content available for free. And you can reach out to people who are there, or you can try and see what places they hang out at.
And just for some latecomers, Froggamer's asking, how did you get into the industry? Can you give us a little summary?
Sure. So I got in the industry kind of by accident. I was 19. I actually, apparently, I trained to be a game designer my whole life without even knowing that the position exists. So I didn't know, I know I couldn't do games programming. I know I'm not an artist. I'm just terrible. I can only draw a cat. But I wanted to make games, but I didn't know how. So I made like maps and stuff like that. And then I got into QA right after high school for a summer job. And the summer job turned into 1 year of QA and then game design. And yeah, 10 years later, I'm here.
What's some of the best advice that you've gotten, Adam?
The best advice I've gotten? I would say the best advice is the advice I gave myself when I started, because there was no one to teach me. I was the only game designer on the company. Which is to every single day do something that puts you a little further on the path to being a game designer, if that's what you want to be. So you read, you study, you dedicate your Saturdays, your Sundays. I decided that the time I spend on that is more valuable than other ways I can spend it. And if you don't do it, then you won't get anywhere. That's the truth. But once you do it, once you work your way in, and if you have the passion, it will not be hard. If you do not, then well, the game development is going to crush you anyway, unless you know how to survive and how to stay curious and how to keep getting better every day.
NOCS Wary is asking, is there a specific game that you would recommend to mod for your portfolio? My brother plans on Skyrim, but do you have any other suggestions that might help?
I think Skyrim is a good choice. I would probably say anything that you find is comfortable to mod. That's what matters most, and whether it's a known game. So something like Skyrim is a great example because Bethesda's games, or Skyrim or Fallout, are very easy to mod. Even they're very easy to test while you're modding because they have quite a lot of extensive tools. You could even mod Dota if you like. You could make assets for the Steam Workshop. You could try to do a lot of stuff within any game that actually has a modding community. And yeah, Skyrim is a good pick. I don't think I have a better one.
Cool. Any more questions from the audience? All right, I'm coming around.
Hello. So I had a question. Do you have any advice about breaking into the industry as a narrative designer?
Absolutely. So there's one tool I'm going to try and be really quick. Inkle. This tool has been used to make a game called 80 Days, and also games in the Sorcery series. These are multi-million selling games made entirely in Inkle, a tool for narrative design and narrative storytelling and for kind of interactive stories. So you could make a great game, or at least a sample game, for yourself with very little help using a tool like that. So what I would say is write a story, either write a story for someone else or write a story in Inkle and put it live.
Cool. Any more questions from the audience? I think we've got to wrap up, so I might have time for one more.
One more suggestion. When it comes to storytelling, there's also quite a lot of games right now on mobile, like choices, which allow you to make your own stories, and some of these stories can then be played by millions of people. So having, in your portfolio, the fact that you made the story and 3 million people played it, that's a very powerful tool. So because you can actually make a story in a game that people will play.
And for our gamers asking, is there any particular game engine that's best to get familiar with?
I would say Unity. Unity is the place to start. Some people say Unreal. Personally, mobile space is where I think quite a lot of activity and growth is at right now. And in the mobile space, Unity is dominant, which is why I would suggest that. And you can also use it to make PC games as well and console games.
Cool. Can we give Adam a big round of applause?
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much to everybody who joined here at the University of Greenwich. Now, if you guys have been watching and you missed something, definitely make sure to go back and check out the video on Twitch, as well as last week's lectures, one from Tom Mejias on creative engineering. There were a lot of programming questions coming up as well. And then one from Andrew Munden on designing for competition if you're into competitive play. Just a reminder that on Mondays we will be here at University of Greenwich and we focus on game design and game development. And on Tuesdays we are at UCL and we focus on competitive play there. Mondays we're streaming at 6 p.m. and Tuesdays at 5 p.m. And you can check out our whole schedule of classes as well. If you are here in London, then definitely register because you can come in person and chat to the speakers and have your questions answered. And of course, if you're watching from home, then just throw your questions into chat. But we will be back tomorrow actually. We'll be back tomorrow, at UCL at 5 p.m. And if you have any questions about the program in general, or if your institution that would like to maybe partner with us, then you can shoot an email to varsity@spaceapegames.com. But yeah, otherwise we'll be back tomorrow and check out our other lectures as well. So thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.